Hi everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, The State of the Transportation Industry. My name is Kim Melton, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's presentation. Before we dive into introductions, I do want to go over a few logistics. If you have any questions or concerns throughout the webinar, you can submit them to our panel at any point during the presentation via the Q&A feature. And we'll address these questions live at the end of the presentation. If you're not seeing your Q&A box, you can go to the view bar at the top, and that will you'll see an option for Q&A, and that will allow you to see that and submit questions as needed. So we're also frequently asked whether or not we send out these presentations upon their conclusion, and we don't actually send out the presentation itself, but we do post a recording of it online for you to watch or share at your leisure. This ensures that you can have the presentation within its full context and allows you to make sure you don't miss out on any of the key details. Additionally, we'll be following today's webinar with a survey, and this is your opportunity to provide us with feedback on how we did today, how we can improve, and you can even ask any additional questions that you may have about the topic or suggest new topics for additional webinars if you'd like. So we are continuously striving to improve these webinars. If you have any comments or suggestions as to how to do that, we will, the survey would be the opportunity to submit that feedback. Now, this survey is also part of how we deliver the JM experience to you. And the JM experience is based on 4 pillars of the JM culture, and that's people, passion, perform, and protect. And we believe it's critical to make sure that we're hearing and understanding and responding to your needs in order to deliver the best interaction to you. So we offer webinars like this one to help educate the market and offer a tool and a resource for you and your business. But we understand that this isn't just a one-way street. So your feedback is a key component to helping us evolve to better meet your needs. Now, with that, we'll dive into some introductions. Joining me today is Dave Sardinta, and he's going to take a few minutes to introduce himself.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Dave Sardinta. I'm the Senior Logistics Manager for Johns Manville. I've been with JM for 13 years now. Been in the industry for 18 years, and prior to that, I was managing the logistics for aviation ordnance for 20 years while in the Marine Corps. Today we're going to talk about the state of the transportation industry. We're going to touch on the driver shortage causes, capacity issues, what's happening with rates, what carriers are doing regarding those subjects, and what we as a shipper can do to become a shipper of choice, and what you can do to become a receiver of choice. So transportation headlines, I'm sure not everybody sits and reads all of these articles that I get to read every day, but here's a few that we're seeing that have popped up this year. There's not enough drivers, and that's pinching U.S. profits. Trucking companies race to add capacity and drivers as the market heats up. Tight trucking market has retailers, manufacturers paying steep prices. Current rates going up in 2018 as carriers gain strength. And Tyson Foods Incorporated expect to pay $200 million extra in freight this year, while Kellogg's company logistics cost will rise nearly 10%. The latest report that just came out from Tyson, their feedback to everybody was that they're actually paying up to some $210 million this year now in additional transportation spend. So it's actually gotten worse than what they anticipated at the beginning of the year. So what's creating all of these headlines? In a nutshell, it's a driver shortage. Every carrier that we have met with last year and including this year come to us with the same issue, same problem, is that they're really struggling getting drivers to sit in their trucks. Truck tonnage. Trucking hauls nearly 70% of all the tonnage in the U.S. Freight volumes are expected to increase by 29% in the next 8 years. So what that means is as tonnage goes up, we're going to really struggle with being able to meet that demand, to move that tonnage. And to meet that demand, we are going to need more drivers. So right now we're in a driver shortage. You can see here let me back up. It takes about 750,000 trucks, Class 8 trucks, to move that tonnage we just mentioned. In 2017, we're 53,000 drivers short to move said tonnage. And the forecast by 2026 is to be 176,000 drivers short. So we're going to see an increased demand of 29% in tonnage, and we're going to see a decrease in drivers, creating a gap that is going to continue to get larger every year. So what's causing this driver shortage? Well, we have a strong U.S. retail sales right now. They're up 4.5% from 2017. There's a strengthening economy. There's record low unemployment. I know in the state of Colorado here, at least Denver, I think we're at 2.6%. The national average is below 4. And then GDP for this quarter was up 4.2%. So we're seeing some pretty solid strengthening in the economy all the way across the market here. And we're also seeing increase in consumer confidence, leading to increased personal income and spending. And if you look here at this chart, U.S. income growth rate equals 4.3% as a national average. Other areas out here, you can see in Washington State, they were up 7.4%. California seemed to be one of the lower ones with 2.7%. But as a whole, as a national average, we've seen income this year go up 4.3%. Another thing that's creating the issues that we're experiencing in the industry right now is the new regulations that are being imposed on us. So the hours of service, that's nothing new. It's been around, I believe it was 2004, they were implemented, and basically what that says is a driver has 14 hours a day from the moment he turns on his truck to when he has to shut it off. Of those 14 hours, he has 11 hours that he's actually allowed to have his wheels turning. And then within that 11 hours, after the 8-hour mark, he has to take a 30-minute break. Well, prior to December 17th of last year, drivers were able to have paper logs or paper logbooks, and a lot of them had dual logbooks, so they were able to cheat the system, if you will. Well, in December 17th, they mandated these new devices called the electronic log device, ELDs. These replace the paper logs, and what they did is there's no cheating the system. When you get in your truck now, you hit the button and say that, I'm starting up the unit, and then it electronically measures everything you're doing for that day. Another challenge with these ELDs is that if you get pulled over at a weigh station, or if you're at a weigh station or you get pulled over by highway patrol, they can plug into these ELDs and see everything you've done for the last 7 to 15 days. And if you've had any hours of service violation, you will receive a citation. So this little device, more than anything, say deregulation back in 1980, has completely changed the transportation industry. And what that change has actually done for us, if you look here in this circle, and I'm going to move my mouse here so hopefully you can see that on the screen, but this white line represents how far we used to be able to travel in one day out of the Defiance, Ohio facility, which that equated to about 650 miles. With the ELD mandate, or with the implementation of the new ELDs, we can now only go within that blue circle, which is 450 miles. So we've lost about 200 to 250 miles a day, depending on what part of the country you're in. The other thing that's done is a driver that was traveling 650 miles for one-day haul, now it's become a 2-day haul or a 1.5-day haul. They're not doing that same distance, that same load for the same amount of money. So part of that's what's driving the rate inflation that we're experiencing. So what does all that mean? It means we have capacity constraints and we have higher rates. So these are a couple of indexes that we'll look at around carrier capacity. This is the van freight index on the left. That is the Morgan Stanley van index, and on the right is the DAT van to load truck ratio. On the left there, what you can see is that scale of 0 to 10. That represents the number of loads that are available for every truck. So you can see in January, right after the ELDs came into place, it spiked up to about 10 loads per every truck. And it's kind of fallen off through the year down to September 18th down there. It's about almost 3. It's still higher than what we've typically seen in the past. That purple line there, that represents last year's hurricanes and when we went into the ELD process or mandate in 2017. The scale on the right, or the index on the right, is the DAT scale. It just validates what we see from the Morgan Stanley indexes. If you go back to the back to the Morgan Stanley, you can see pretty typically every July we have a spike in the number of loads available, or basically a greater capacity constraint at that time frame, and that's a result of drivers are guaranteed, for the most part, that they're going to be able to go home for the 4th of July. So when you're planning your loads or planning your orders, keep that in mind. Every July we seem to see a capacity issue. So we thought we had issues with the van market right now. This is the flatbed index. If you look the scale on the left, that number on the left on the top there was actually, it shows 60 compared to 10 for the van. So you can see how much greater the capacity constraint is on the flatbed market than it is on the van market. And in some locations, let's say Chicago or Birmingham, Alabama, that number on the left actually spiked up to 120, 130 loads available for every flatbed. Now, it's dropped off, I would say, nicely for those of us who are trying to find flatbeds, but it's a very difficult market in the flatbed world. So what we'll look at here are some heat maps for the United States. So back in May of this year, you can see the darker the red, as the legend indicates on the right, the darker the red, the tighter the capacity is, or the greater number of loads available for every truck out there from a van perspective. In June, it started to soften a little bit, but it still remained pretty tight in the southeast markets. And then in August, you can see we've seen a greater relax on the capacity, which kind of goes in line with that red line we saw on the Morgan Stanley index in the previous slide. So all of this is just this capacity constraint, these capacity issues, all of this has led to higher transportation rates. In July of this year, rates on the spot market rose 29% higher compared to July of 2017. If you look at this particular index, this is the Cass Truckload Line Haul Index, it supports that 29% increase that experts said we have experienced. That on the left, those numbers on the left are not an indication of a cost per mile like $1.33 or whatever. That's not that. It's just an index. It's a scale that they keep or utilize. And you can tell looking at that line that we're paying much higher rates this year than we have in any of the previous years. So what are carriers doing to address this driver shortage? So a few things that are happening right now is there's some legislation or proposed legislation out there to try to lower the driver age from 21 years old to 18. A lot of experts don't feel that's ever going to happen. It kind of scares me to think of an 18-year-old kid going down the road with an 80,000-pound truck. So we don't think that's going to happen. What they're proposing more is kind of if you're 18 to 21, maybe an internship, maybe an intra versus an interstate opportunity. So we'll see if that opens up some additional capacity in the future. They're talking about raising driver pay, and they've actually, year over year, this year more than any other year, the percent increase seems to, from what we were hearing from carriers, it seems like every 6 months they're giving their drivers another 10% pay raise. Last year, the average salary was around $40,000 for a driver. We're seeing that much higher right now. We have a lot of carriers coming to us saying that to secure good, solid drivers, they're having to pay up to $75,000 a year. They're talking about going to a salary-based and then a mileage-based mix. Historically, it's just been getting paid by the mile. Walmart was paying their drivers $73K, and we've heard stories where the top-notch Walmart drivers are getting closer to the $80,000, $90,000 a year salary. So that, as we know, anytime you pay somebody more, that cost is going to be transferred off to somebody else, and that's what we're experiencing is a kind of a rush of rate increases to us right now. They're also offering incentives. There's sign-on bonuses, their retention bonuses. Other stories we've heard from carriers is that when they do their sign-on bonuses, a driver will stay long enough to collect his sign-on bonus, and once he's achieved those requirements, he moves on to another carrier to get another sign-on bonus. The numbers or stats are indicating that if you're a larger carrier, let's say 200 to 300 drivers or more, that the turnover rate's well above 100%. for their drivers. And if it's a smaller carrier, let's say a 50 and below, there's a much less, 75, maybe 80% churning of carriers, or turning of drivers, I'm sorry. So they're also working on an improved lifestyle. They want to commit to their drivers that they're going to have more home time, and they're also letting dogs travel with the drivers now. They're working on changing the image of the truck driver, the days of the cowboy truck driver. They're trying to make it more glamorous, make truck driving more sexy, try to appeal to kind of a different sort of mentality when it comes to truck driving. And then they're also really going out after military veterans and working on a transition from the military right into truck driving. So those are kind of the basic things that they're doing. Some of the things behind the scenes that they're looking at productivity killers within their networks. So if I'm a carrier and I know that I've got to do some deadhead miles of over 200, or empty miles, if you will, of over 100 miles, they're starting to eliminate those types of loads that they're starting to accept, or that they were accepting in the past. They're eliminating multi-stop loads. If a driver picks up a load and has to do more than a pickup and a stop, or maybe 2 stops, they're refusing those loads. They're not doing those anymore. They don't make any money off of those. So they're really optimizing their network to keep their drivers moving. They don't make any money if their drivers aren't moving, and drivers don't make any money if they're not turning their wheels. So they're also scorecarding shippers and they're scorecarding receivers. They're firing shippers that are taking too long to load. So the recent conversations I've had with carriers tell me that if they have to sit at a loading dock for more than 2 hours, they'll only do that once. They're not going to do that twice. They will stop going to those locations if they have to sit more than 2 hours. So we're trying to make a big change into the drop and hook environment. So instead of 2 hours waiting to load, they're in and out within 15 to 30 minutes. And they're opting out of lanes that take too long to unload. If they have to sit at a customer's job site or a customer's facility and they're sitting there for more than 2 hours, that's the last time they'll go to that location as well. They're really in the driver's seat this year, more so than they've been in the last few years. That pendulum always swings between us and between the carriers, or a shipper and a carrier. Right now it's definitely on the carrier side. And when you speak with some of the experts in the field, they will tell you that they don't see that pendulum coming back to the shipper's side for probably the next 3 to 5 years. So here at JM, what we're focusing on this year is becoming a shipper of choice. It's kind of a buzzword within the industry right now, but it really has a true impact to carriers choosing to haul for us versus not haul for us. So to be a shipper of choice, some of the things that we've been working on is to pay a fair, competitive market rate. I'm often asked, if we paid more, would we get better service? If we paid less, would we get poorer service? There was a study that came out that says, if you pay fair market rate or fair competitive rates, you're going to get the best service and the greatest number of carriers that want to haul in that particular lane for you. The other thing that we work on is fast payment terms. We have a third party that allows us to pay our carriers within 2 days, assuming they input the 4 data points that are required to trigger that payment. So instead of a 30-day or 45-day terms, these carriers are getting paid in 2 days, and that's actually making us much more appealing than someone who's paying in a longer term. Another thing that's important to the drivers is being treated with respect. When they come to the dock, and do they have a place at our facility to use a restroom, to get water, to wash and clean up? Those types of things allow drivers to feel better about themselves. To be treated with respect is huge to them, and so we're making a concerted effort here at JM to make sure that's the treatment they're receiving in our facilities. We're also focusing on drop trailer utilization, and that's that drop and hook environment I was talking about that allows drivers to get in and out of here within 30 minutes, and then keeping loading times under an hour. This year, JM has implemented in, let me back up, October 23rd, I believe the date, we're implementing a new process called JM Ship. And what that is going to do is we're putting kiosks in all of our facilities that ship more than 7 loads a day. And any carrier that comes in and does live loads, they're going to log into this system, put in their load number, some additional information, and it's going to trigger a feed to a screen on the shipping dock that shows when this guy checked in, and then it's going to start measuring how long that driver has been sitting there. So the advantage to this for us at JM is going to allow us to truly measure ourselves against each other, against other facilities, to say, all right, we're shipping the same product from this facility and the same product from that facility. This one's taking 2 hours to load. This guy over here is taking 4 hours to load. What's the difference? Why do we have disparity if there is a disparity? So that is going to allow us to share best practices across our different shipping points. Being a receiver of choice, that's where you guys come in, is many of the same rules that apply to shipping apply to receiving. The goal is to reduce loading and unloading delays. If we can get that truck offloaded in an hour, that's huge to these drivers. Another thing that we need to do is rethink the just-in-time approach. I know historically we've been able to say, all right, I've got a crew sitting there at 7 o'clock, that truck needs to be here at 7 o'clock. Well, I can tell you this morning, I drove into work, it was, and this is a true story because there was someone else in here this morning that said the same thing. It's a 20-mile drive. It typically takes me 35, 40 minutes to get into our downtown facility. It took me an hour and a half this morning because the highway was blocked off because of an accident. Things like that happen. So those are out of our controls, they're out of a driver control. They don't want to sit there. They're not making any money sitting there. So rethinking that just-in-time approach and creating flexible appointment schedules or windows that says, you know, I'll take this load from 7 to 11 or 1 to 5 or whatever, or even the day before. It's better for the drivers. It's better. It makes you a receiver of choice in that driver's or that shipping company's eyes. If you can provide drop-in hook opportunities to your facilities, just like our facilities, that's a plus. And again, treat drivers with respect. If that driver does show up an hour late, when he gets out of the truck and the first thing he gets yelled at is, where the heck have you been? That's not how we want to treat those drivers. And again, someone gets yelled at for that, I promise you they're not going to come back. And then really understanding loads are going to be late. Plan for it. With the new ELD mandate that went into place this year, we've seen an on-time performance across the entire network drop. And we're working to get that back up to where it needs to be, but the industry as a whole has really taken a hit on its on-time performance because of these ELDs. Also allowing drivers to park on your property when and where feasible. So let's say you wanted a 7 o'clock appointment and the driver knows that he can park either at your facility or across the street or somewhere close that's a safe, secure area. That driver has a better chance of getting there and wanting to get there because he knows he's got a place to park, as opposed to stopping an hour away from your facility at a truck stop where he knows that's a safe location. So if you have that opportunity, let your customer service rep know that a driver, or the truck can actually park at your facility if he gets here earlier. And then timely notifications of changes to operating hours. Some of the things that we've seen in the past is we'll get a request to deliver a load on Monday. Well, Monday happens to be Christmas, and it's like, are they really going to be open on Christmas? Are they going to be open on Thanksgiving? And so we'll call the customer, and it's like, oh, no, we really don't want that Monday, we want that Tuesday. Keep that line of communication open with customer service if those are changes or restrictions that are happening within your operating hours. All right, so one of the big questions we get a lot is, what can we do to mitigate inflation? From our transportation team, we're always looking at opportunities that save us money and ultimately save our customers money. And so intermodal versus over-the-road shipments, if your location is further than 750 miles away from one of our shipping points, if we can convert from truckload to intermodal shipments, there's the potential there to save cost for both you and for us. If you can increase lead times, which allows for asset-based carrier utilization, what we find is that we typically try to dispatch at least 5 days out. As we get closer to the 5 days, 4 days, 3 days to when the load is actually supposed to ship, we have a tendency to go further into our stable of carriers because the good carriers or the less expensive carriers are already being utilized. Carriers will tell you that they like to book 3 to 5 days out. And if we get less than 48 hours or 24 hours notice, what that does to us is it forces us to go to the spot market or brokers. But when we're forced to go to the spot market like that, we're stuck at whatever market rate is, and it seems that when you go to the spot market, they know that you're in a hurt locker and a time constraint, so they like to jack up their rates. The other thing that we can do is full truck versus partial truck loads. Whether that truck rides with 10,000 pounds or 40,000 pounds, the cost is pretty much the same, whether it's 10% filled or 100% filled. The cost is no different. So full truckloads definitely save everybody money. And then as we talked about earlier, the stop, if we eliminating or minimizing multi-stop loads, if we can do a stop and a final with no more than 50 miles in between those stops, it makes it much more appealing to the carriers. We get less rejections when we have when it falls under this criteria. If something is more than, let's say, 200 miles on a stop or between stops or 250 miles, that usually causes the carrier to roll into the next day, and they charge for an extra day of utilization. So these simple things really benefit everybody if we can take a look at these opportunities as we move forward this year. So something that always pops up when we have these conversations with customers is, what's going to happen in the future? What about autonomous vehicles, right? By the way, that's a cool looking truck. So automated vehicles are not going to displace truck drivers. There's still going to be somebody in the truck. Think about at your facility, if you expected in the next 5 years an autonomous truck to pull up to your gate and you be able to punch in a code on the side of that truck and say, please back up to dock number 2, or watch out for that pile of pallets I have over there when you're backing in. These guys, the truck drivers aren't going to go away. We still need these truck drivers. Where autonomous trucks are really going to come into place is what we think is going to be that point on the highway of entrance and that point of exit on the highway. The American Center of Mobility projects that the automated vehicles will not deploy until the later half of the 2020s. And what they're looking to do here is we can speculate, right? Because nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. But from, let's say, a shipping point or manufacturer's facility to the local highway, that's going to be a driver taking it to that point. So there's going to be an in-gate, if you will, something that they talk about in intermodal shipments. There'll be an in-gate on these trucks. Then that can convert over to an automated vehicle, and potentially we think that they'll be able to have 3 or 4 trucks in tandem. So you have one driver driving from that point of entry to that in-gate, and then behind him maybe 3 trucks that are following that particular lead truck. Now that's going to ease some of the capacity requirements or constraints when it comes to drivers, but you're still going to have that final leg transportation. So once it gets to that in-gate, then that converts back over to a regular local driver, and then that guy will be going to your facility or a facility to deliver that final leg of transportation. I think that we started to make some huge headway into the automated world, but as Tesla and some other people saw that there's still a fear factor out there. There's still legislation. There's still liability that it's going to have to all be worked out before these things are, before we see them running down the road. There's been a couple successful tests we've seen from Fort Collins out here to Colorado Springs. Budweiser was able to do that. But that was from their highway, their distribution point near the highway to their same type of facility at the other end. So I don't think we're going to see trucks with no drivers in it, at least hopefully I don't in the near future. It kind of scares me a little bit. But anyway, so in summary, Basically, the transportation industry has changed. December 17th was something that those of us in the trucking world will always remember of probably the biggest change since deregulation. And the challenge here is it's not going to change back. It's not going to go back to the way it was. Transportation industry has changed, and we need to change with it. The driver shortage is real, and it's not going to go away either. It's just going to get worse, as we saw. I mean, despite the automation, despite all the recruiting practices that they're working and doing, and bonuses and additional pay they're handing out there, it's not a lifestyle that a lot of people want and are willing to accept and do. So we don't see that driver shortage in the near future. At least in 2026, we saw 173,000 trucks short. It's not going away. And carriers nowadays, carriers and drivers, they have a choice. They really can decide what loads they want to take and what they don't want to take, and we need to give them a reason to choose us and to choose you as a receiver of choice. We're working hard here at JM to make sure that we're seen as a driver-friendly environment, that they want to come to our facilities, they're treated with respect, and hopefully they're receiving that same feeling when they get to their final destination, and that same respect. I mean, it is amazing if you would just hand that driver when he shows up, whether he was an hour or two late, when he shows up, hey, thanks for being here, here's a bottle of water. You'd be surprised how far that goes with a carrier. I'm going to hand this over to Kim. Here you go.
Thanks, Dave. So I would like to take a few minutes to go through some additional resources that we have for you. And you'll find all of these resources you see here on your screen, the training, tools, blog, specifications, and webinars on an online portal that we call The Source. Now, our training is basically, they're online modules, and they go over JM products, from everything you need to know from how to install them to what they actually are. On our blog, we write and curate the content for the blog so that we're not only relying on our own technical experts at JM, but we're also we're finding information from technical experts in the field and the ones throughout the industry. Our blog hot topics hit on targeted technical information, the latest news in the industry, and even scientific details that are critical to successful installation system design and operation. So we do try to strive to make this content as rich and relevant as possible so that it can actually better serve you and the information that you need and you are looking for. There is a full library of documentation and our specifications on The Source, so you can actually do a side-by-side product comparison there, and you can access the product pages from that. And then finally, this is where we also host our tools and recorded webinars. Now, our tools are things like the NAMA 3E Plus tool, which is designed to help you in your specifications. We even have a smart binder where you can get our product data sheets, etc. And then we have our recorded webinars. And this is just like today's webinar. We have recorded it. We'll record the questions, and we will post this all online once we've had a chance to review it to make sure that it's all easy to see and understand. And then you can actually access this at your convenience. So this is all, like I said, located online on our portal called The Source.